Rebecca Martinez had always been different from her peers at Fort Benning. While other recruits stumbled through basic training, she moved with purpose and precision that caught everyone's attention. Her drill instructor, Staff Sergeant Jennifer Williams, saw something special in the quiet girl from Phoenix who never complained, never gave up, and always pushed harder when others around her were ready to quit. The Georgia heat was merciless that summer, pressing down on the training grounds like a suffocating blanket. Rebecca remembered the first time she met Williams during processing day. The staff sergeant stood ramrod straight, her voice cutting through the chaos of new arrivals with surgical precision. Her presence commanded respect without demanding it, and Rebecca knew immediately that this woman would change her life forever. Williams had served 3 tours in Afghanistan before becoming a drill instructor. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had seen the worst humanity could offer and emerged stronger. Her approach to training was different from the other instructors. While they relied on intimidation and volume, Williams used psychology and personal connection to forge soldiers who could think under pressure. During those first weeks, Rebecca watched Williams carefully. The staff sergeant noticed everything, which recruits were struggling with homesickness, who needed extra motivation, and who possessed the rare combination of mental toughness and emotional intelligence required for leadership. Rebecca fell into that last category, though she didn't realize it yet. The turning point came during their 4th week of training. Rebecca was leading her squad through a particularly challenging obstacle course when Private Johnson, a kid from rural Alabama, suffered a panic attack halfway through. The other recruits wanted to leave him behind, but Rebecca refused. She stayed with Johnson, talking him through his fear while the clock ticked away precious seconds. Williams observed from a distance, making notes on her clipboard. When the exercise ended, she pulled Rebecca aside. "You could have finished first if you'd left him behind," Williams said, her voice steady and measured. "Why didn't you?" Rebecca met her instructor's gaze without flinching. "Because that's not who I want to be, Staff Sergeant. If I can't bring my team with me, then I'm not really succeeding." That conversation marked the beginning of a mentorship that would define Rebecca's military career. Williams began pushing her harder, giving her additional responsibilities, and challenging her in ways that went beyond physical training. She taught Rebecca that true strength came not from individual achievement, but from the ability to inspire others to exceed their own limitations. The lessons extended beyond the training grounds. Williams would often find Rebecca after evening chow, sharing stories about leadership in combat, the weight of responsibility, and the importance of maintaining composure when everything around you was falling apart. These conversations planted seeds that would later bloom in the most crucial moments of Rebecca's military service. Rebecca absorbed every word, every lesson, every piece of wisdom that Williams shared. She began to understand that becoming a soldier was about more than following orders or mastering weapons. It was about becoming someone others could depend on when the world turned chaotic and dangerous. As graduation approached, Williams pulled Rebecca aside one final time. "You have something special," she said, her voice carrying unusual warmth. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. When the moment comes, and it will come, remember that you've already survived the hardest thing you'll ever face. Everything else is just application." Rebecca nodded, not fully understanding what Williams meant, but knowing the words would stay with her forever. She had no idea that 5 years later, in a dusty compound halfway around the world, those words would save her life and the lives of everyone depending on her leadership. The graduation ceremony was emotional for everyone involved. Rebecca's parents had flown in from Phoenix, their pride evident in every photograph and embrace. But it was William's nod of approval that meant the most. The staff sergeant had seen something in Rebecca from the beginning, and through months of careful guidance, she had helped forge that potential into something powerful and unbreakable. After basic training, Rebecca's career progressed rapidly. She excelled in every assignment, earned the respect of her peers and superiors, and demonstrated the kind of leadership that Williams had recognized from the beginning. But the real test of her character was still years away, waiting in the mountains of Afghanistan, where life and death decisions would have to be made in split seconds. Rebecca often thought about Williams during her deployments. The staff sergeant's voice seemed to echo in her mind during difficult moments, reminding her of lessons learned on the training grounds of Fort Benning. She carried William's wisdom like a compass, always pointing toward the right decision, even when the path ahead seemed unclear. The bond between drill instructor and recruit was sacred in the military. Williams had invested herself in Rebecca's success, and Rebecca had honored that investment by becoming everything Williams believed she could be. Neither woman knew that their connection would ultimately be tested in ways neither had imagined, in a place where seconds could determine who lived and who died. Years passed, and Rebecca found herself leading soldiers in combat zones, making decisions that would have terrified her younger self. But William's training had prepared her for this responsibility. Every lesson, every challenge, every moment of doubt had been building toward something larger than either of them had realized during those hot summer days in Georgia. The echo of William's voice became Rebecca's constant companion, a reminder of who she was and what she was capable of achieving. That voice would prove to be her salvation when everything else failed, when fear threatened to overwhelm her, and when the lives of her soldiers hung in the balance of a single moment of clarity. Rebecca's unit was eventually deployed to a forward operating base in Afghanistan's Kunar province. The region was known for its challenging terrain and persistent enemy activity. It was here that all of William's training would finally be put to the ultimate test. The mountains held dangers that no training exercise could fully prepare someone for. But the foundation Williams had built in Rebecca's character would prove stronger than any enemy they might face. The base was a collection of concrete barriers, tents, and prefabricated buildings surrounded by razor wire and watchful guards. Rebecca had been promoted to sergeant and was responsible for a squad of 12 soldiers, each one someone's son or daughter, each one depending on her to bring them home safely. The weight of that responsibility was exactly what Williams had prepared her for, though Rebecca was only beginning to understand the full scope of what lay ahead. Rebecca's reputation as a competent and caring leader spread quickly through the base. Her soldiers trusted her because she had earned that trust through consistent actions and genuine concern for their welfare. She remembered William's lesson about bringing everyone with you, and she applied it daily in ways both large and small. Whether it was ensuring proper equipment maintenance, conducting thorough mission briefings, or simply listening when someone needed to talk, Rebecca embodied the leadership principles Williams had taught her. The enemy in this region was crafty and patient, often setting elaborate ambushes that could turn routine patrols into deadly encounters. Rebecca knew that her soldiers' survival depended on constant vigilance and flawless execution under pressure. She drilled them repeatedly on immediate action procedures, ensuring that their responses would be automatic when the time came. William's voice echoed in her mind during these training sessions, reminding her that repetition built confidence, and confidence saved lives. 3 months into their deployment, Rebecca's squad was assigned to a patrol that would take them through a particularly dangerous valley. Intelligence reports suggested increased enemy activity in the area, but the mission was considered essential for gathering information about insurgent movements. Rebecca spent extra time preparing her soldiers, reviewing maps, checking equipment, and discussing contingency plans. She could feel William's presence in every decision, every precaution, every moment of preparation. The patrol began before dawn, with Rebecca leading her soldiers through terrain that seemed designed to hide threats. Every ridge, every cluster of rocks, every stand of trees could conceal an enemy position. Rebecca's training had taught her to read the landscape like a book, identifying potential danger areas and planning routes that would minimize their exposure while still accomplishing their mission objectives. As they moved through the valley, Rebecca felt a familiar tension building in her chest. It was the same feeling she had experienced during training exercises, but magnified by the knowledge that this time, the consequences of failure would be measured in lives rather than simply poor performance evaluations. William's voice whispered in her mind, reminding her that she had already proven herself capable of handling whatever challenges lay ahead. The morning passed without incident, but Rebecca's instincts told her that something was wrong. The valley was too quiet, too empty of the normal signs of civilian activity. Her soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, but she could see the tension in their postures, the way their eyes constantly scanned for threats. They trusted her to lead them safely through this dangerous terrain, and she was determined not to let them down. As they approached a narrow section of the valley, Rebecca called a halt. Something about the terrain ahead bothered her, though she couldn't immediately identify what it was. Williams had taught her to trust her instincts, to listen to the voice that warned of danger even when logic suggested everything was normal. Rebecca studied the path ahead, looking for signs of disturbance, anything that might indicate an ambush waiting to unfold. The silence stretched longer than usual, and Rebecca's soldiers began to shift nervously. They had learned to trust their sergeant's judgment, but the tension was becoming almost unbearable. Rebecca knew that Williams would have handled this moment with calm authority, making decisions based on experience and training rather than fear or uncertainty. She took a deep breath and prepared to move forward, unaware that William's most important lesson was about to be put to the ultimate test. The first shots came from three directions simultaneously, turning the quiet valley into a chaos of sound and movement. Rebecca's training kicked in automatically, her voice cutting through the noise as she directed her soldiers to covered positions. But something was wrong. The volume of fire was overwhelming, far beyond what they had encountered in previous engagements. This wasn't a simple ambush. It was a carefully planned assault designed to overwhelm their position and eliminate her entire squad. Rebecca found herself crouched behind a boulder, her heart pounding as bullets whined overhead. Her soldiers were pinned down, unable to move without exposing themselves to deadly crossfire. The enemy had chosen their position perfectly, creating a killing zone that seemed impossible to escape. For the first time in her military career, Rebecca felt the cold grip of panic beginning to take hold. This was the moment Williams had prepared her for, though neither of them had known it at the time. All the training, all the conversations, all the lessons about leadership under pressure had been building toward this single moment when everything would depend on Rebecca's ability to think clearly and act decisively. The echo of William's voice was about to become the difference between life and death for everyone in her command. Rebecca's mind raced as she tried to assess their situation. The enemy fire was coming from elevated positions on three sides, creating overlapping fields of fire that made movement extremely dangerous. Her soldiers were scattered among whatever cover they could find, but their positions were becoming increasingly untenable as the enemy adjusted their aim. She could hear the fear in their voices as they called out their positions and ammunition status. The radio crackled with reports from each fire team, painting a picture of a situation that was deteriorating rapidly. Private Williams had been hit in the leg and was unable to move. Corporal Johnson was running low on ammunition. Specialist Davis was pinned down in a position that offered almost no protection. Rebecca knew that without immediate action, her entire squad would be overrun within minutes. But something strange was happening to Rebecca's mind. The overwhelming noise of the firefight began to fade, replaced by a familiar voice that seemed to come from somewhere deep within her memory. It was Williams, speaking to her across the years from that hot training ground in Georgia. When the moment comes, remember that you've already survived the hardest thing you'll ever face. Everything else is just application. The words hit Rebecca like a physical force, cutting through her panic and replacing it with a clarity she had never experienced before. Williams was right. She had already proven herself capable of handling impossible situations. The skills were there, the training was there, the leadership ability was there. All she had to do was apply what she had learned and trust in the foundation Williams had built within her character. Rebecca's breathing steadied, and her mind began working with the systematic precision Williams had taught her. She started by gathering information, keying her radio to get accurate reports from each of her soldiers. The panic was still there, but it was now contained within a framework of professional competence that allowed her to function despite the fear. William's voice continued to echo in her mind, reminding her that leaders found solutions when others saw only problems. The tactical situation became clearer as Rebecca processed the information flowing from her soldiers. The enemy was using a classic L-shaped ambush, with the heaviest fire coming from their left flank, while supporting positions provided crossfire from the front and right. It was textbook infantry tactics, but Rebecca realized that the enemy's adherence to doctrine might also be their weakness. Williams had taught her to look for patterns in enemy behavior, to find the vulnerabilities that existed even in well-planned attacks. Rebecca began formulating a plan that would have seemed impossible moments before. She would need to coordinate her soldiers' movements with perfect timing, using suppressive fire to create windows of opportunity for bound and cover movements. It was dangerous and complex, but Williams had drilled similar scenarios into her during training. The principles were the same. The only difference was that this time, failure would mean death rather than simply having to repeat the exercise. As Rebecca prepared to execute her plan, she could feel William's presence more strongly than ever. The drill instructor's voice provided a steady counterpoint to the chaos around her, reminding her of lessons learned and confidence earned through countless hours of preparation. Rebecca knew that Williams would be proud of what she was about to attempt, and that knowledge gave her the strength to overcome her remaining doubts. The next few minutes would determine whether Rebecca's soldiers lived or died. Everything Williams had taught her about leadership, about courage, about the ability to function under extreme pressure, was about to be put to the ultimate test. Rebecca took a deep breath, keyed her radio, and began issuing orders that would either save her squad or lead them all to destruction. Rebecca's voice cut through the chaos with surprising clarity as she began coordinating her squad's response. Alpha Team, lay down suppressive fire on the ridgeline to our left. Bravo Team, prepare to bound to the rock formation at 2 o'clock on my signal. Charlie Team, you're going to provide overwatch and cover our movement. The plan was ambitious and dangerous, requiring split-second timing and absolute trust between team members. Rebecca could hear William's voice in her mind, emphasizing the importance of clear communication and decisive action under pressure. Each soldier would have to perform their role perfectly, or the entire operation would collapse into disaster. Private Martinez, the team's machine gunner, opened fire on the enemy positions with sustained bursts that forced the insurgents to take cover. The sudden increase in volume from their position caused the enemy fire to shift momentarily, creating the window Rebecca needed. She signaled for Bravo Team to move, watching as they sprinted from cover to cover in perfectly timed bounds. The enemy responded by intensifying their fire, but Rebecca's plan was already in motion. As Bravo Team reached their new position, they immediately began engaging targets from a different angle, forcing the enemy to split their attention. Charlie Team provided precise covering fire, picking off enemy fighters who exposed themselves while trying to engage the repositioning Americans. Rebecca felt a surge of pride watching her soldiers execute the complex maneuver. Williams had been right about the importance of thorough training and building confidence through repetition. Her soldiers were performing like the professionals they had been trained to be, even under circumstances that would have overwhelmed less prepared units. But the battle was far from over. The enemy had been surprised by Rebecca's aggressive response, but they were quickly adapting their tactics. Rebecca could see muzzle flashes from new positions as reinforcements arrived to strengthen the ambush. The insurgents were trying to regain the initiative, and Rebecca knew that her window of opportunity was closing rapidly. William's voice echoed in her mind with increasing urgency. Adapt and overcome. Never let the enemy dictate the terms of engagement. Keep them reacting to your decisions, not the other way around. Rebecca realized that she needed to maintain the momentum of her initial success, to keep pressing forward before the enemy could fully reorganize their defenses. She made a decision that would have seemed reckless to outside observers, but was actually the product of careful calculation and years of training. Instead of consolidating their improved position, Rebecca ordered her squad to continue the attack, using their temporary advantage to completely disrupt the enemy's carefully planned ambush. The next phase of the battle unfolded with the kind of controlled violence that Williams had taught her to appreciate. Rebecca's soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, bounding from cover to cover while maintaining continuous fire on enemy positions. The insurgents, caught off guard by the Americans' aggressive response, began to fall back from their prepared positions. Rebecca coordinated the advance with the same systematic precision she had learned during countless training exercises. She assigned sectors of fire, designated rally points, and maintained constant communication with her soldiers. William's influence was evident in every decision, every command, every moment of leadership that kept her squad focused and effective despite the chaos surrounding them. As the enemy began to retreat, Rebecca faced another crucial decision. Pursuit operations were always dangerous, as retreating forces might be leading attackers into secondary ambushes. But she also knew that allowing the enemy to escape meant they could regroup and attack again at a time and place of their choosing. Williams had taught her to be aggressive when the situation called for it, to press advantages before they disappeared. Rebecca made the call to pursue, but with careful coordination and mutual support between her teams. She divided her squad into bounding elements, with one team always in position to provide covering fire while the other advanced. It was a complex maneuver that required absolute trust and communication, but her soldiers had been trained for exactly this type of operation. The pursuit continued for several hundred meters before Rebecca called a halt. Her soldiers had successfully disrupted the ambush, eliminated several enemy fighters, and forced the remainder to abandon their prepared positions. More importantly, they had done so without suffering any casualties beyond Private Williams' minor leg wound, which had been treated by their medic during the firefight. As the immediate danger passed, Rebecca felt the adrenaline beginning to fade, replaced by a profound sense of accomplishment and gratitude. William's training had not only saved her life, but had enabled her to save the lives of every soldier in her command. The drill instructor's voice had guided her through the most challenging moment of her military career, proving that the bond between teacher and student could transcend time and distance. Rebecca gathered her soldiers for a brief after-action review, a practice Williams had emphasized as crucial for continuous improvement. They discussed what had worked well, what could be improved, and how they might handle similar situations in the future. The conversation was professional and focused, but Rebecca could see the pride in her soldiers' eyes as they realized what they had accomplished together. The radio crackled with reports from other units in the area, and Rebecca learned that her squad's actions had disrupted a larger enemy operation. The insurgents had been planning coordinated attacks against multiple American positions, but the failure of their ambush had forced them to abandon their plans. William's training had not only saved Rebecca's squad, but had potentially prevented casualties throughout their entire area of operations. As they prepared to return to base, Rebecca took a moment to reflect on what had happened. The freezing moment when panic had threatened to overwhelm her had been replaced by clarity and decisive action, all because William's voice had echoed in her mind at the crucial moment. The drill instructor's investment in her development had paid dividends in ways neither of them could have anticipated. Rebecca's soldiers moved with the confidence of professionals who had been tested in combat and emerged victorious. They had trusted their sergeant's leadership, and that trust had been rewarded with success. The bond between them had been strengthened by shared danger and mutual dependence, creating the kind of unit cohesion that Williams had always emphasized as essential for military effectiveness. The after-action report Rebecca would file later would describe the tactical details of the engagement, but it couldn't capture the psychological journey she had experienced. The moment when William's voice had cut through her panic would remain a private victory, a testament to the power of mentorship and the lasting impact of inspired teaching. As they walked back through the valley that had nearly become their graveyard, Rebecca felt a deep connection to Williams and to all the drill instructors who had shaped her military career. They had given her more than technical skills. They had given her the confidence to lead others through the most challenging circumstances imaginable. That gift was now being passed to her own soldiers, who would carry these lessons forward in their own careers. Rebecca's successful leadership during the ambush would become part of her unit's history, a story that would be retold to future soldiers as an example of how training, preparation, and mental toughness could overcome seemingly impossible odds. But for Rebecca, the most important victory was personal. She had honored William's investment in her development by becoming the leader the drill instructor had always believed she could be. The base appeared ahead of them, its familiar silhouette offering safety and rest after the intensity of combat. Rebecca's soldiers were exhausted but victorious, their confidence boosted by the knowledge that they had faced a serious enemy threat and emerged stronger. William's influence had shaped not just Rebecca's actions, but the entire squad's performance, creating a legacy that would continue long after their deployment ended. As they approached the base perimeter, Rebecca made a mental note to write a letter to Williams, sharing the story of how the drill instructor's voice had guided her through the most challenging moment of her military career. It would be a way of closing the circle, of acknowledging the debt she owed to the woman who had seen her potential and helped her develop it into something powerful and lasting. The guards at the gate welcomed them back with relief and curiosity, having monitored the radio traffic during the firefight. Rebecca's squad had earned a reputation for competence and reliability, and their successful handling of the ambush would only enhance that reputation. But Rebecca knew that the real victory belonged to Williams, whose training had made everything possible. Rebecca's commanding officer was waiting for her in the operations center, eager to hear her account of the engagement. The debriefing would be thorough and professional, covering every aspect of the tactical situation and the decisions that had led to their success. But Rebecca knew that no official report could capture the moment when William's voice had cut through her panic and restored her confidence. As she began recounting the events of the patrol, Rebecca felt William's presence in the room with her. The drill instructor's influence had shaped not just her actions during the firefight, but her entire approach to leadership and responsibility. Every decision, every command, every moment of courage had been built on the foundation Williams had laid during those hot summer days at Fort Benning. The debriefing continued for over an hour, with Rebecca providing detailed accounts of enemy positions, ammunition expenditures, and the tactical decisions that had led to their success. Her commanding officer was impressed by the squad's performance and by Rebecca's leadership under pressure. The engagement would be studied by other units as an example of how proper training and aggressive leadership could overcome numerical disadvantages. But for Rebecca, the most important validation came from her soldiers. They had trusted her to lead them through danger, and that trust had been rewarded with success. Williams had taught her that leadership was about serving others, about being worthy of the confidence they placed in her judgment. The ambush had been the ultimate test of that principle, and Rebecca had passed with distinction. As the debriefing concluded, Rebecca felt a profound sense of gratitude toward Williams and toward all the instructors who had shaped her military career. They had given her more than skills. They had given her the confidence to lead others through the most challenging circumstances imaginable. That gift was now being passed to her own soldiers, who would carry these lessons forward in their own careers. The evening brought time for personal reflection as Rebecca sat in her quarters, writing the letter to Williams that would carry news of the day's events back to Fort Benning. She wanted to share not just the tactical details, but the emotional journey she had experienced. The moment when William's voice had cut through her panic and restored her clarity. It was a debt that could never be fully repaid, but it could be acknowledged and honored. Rebecca's letter would eventually find its way to Williams, who would read it with the pride of a teacher whose investment in a student had paid dividends beyond measure. The drill instructor would share the story with other instructors, adding it to the informal collection of success stories that motivated them to continue their demanding work. Williams would know that her efforts had not only shaped Rebecca's career, but had potentially saved lives in a dusty valley halfway around the world. The cycle of mentorship and development that Williams had begun would continue through Rebecca's own leadership. The soldiers she had led through the ambush would carry the lessons they had learned to their own assignments, spreading the influence of Williams' teaching in ways that neither instructor nor student could have imagined. The echo of the drill instructor's voice would continue to resonate through the ranks, shaping leaders who would face their own moments of crisis with the confidence and skills necessary to succeed. As Rebecca prepared for sleep, she reflected on the day's events with a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. She had been tested in the most fundamental way possible and had emerged victorious. William's training had not only saved her life, but had enabled her to save the lives of every soldier in her command. The drill instructor's voice had guided her through the most challenging moment of her military career, proving that the bond between teacher and student could transcend time and distance. The next morning brought new challenges and responsibilities, but Rebecca faced them with the confidence of someone who had been tested in combat and emerged stronger. Her soldiers looked at her with increased respect and trust, knowing that she had led them through danger and brought them home safely. William's influence was evident in every interaction, every decision, every moment of leadership that continued to shape Rebecca's military career. Rebecca's success would eventually lead to promotion and increased responsibility, but she would never forget the moment when William's voice had cut through her panic and restored her confidence. The drill instructor's investment in her development had paid dividends in ways that neither of them could have anticipated, creating a legacy that would continue to influence military leadership for years to come. The story of Rebecca's actions during the ambush would become part of her unit's history, a testament to the power of proper training and inspired leadership. But for Rebecca, the most important victory was personal. She had honored William's investment in her development by becoming the leader the drill instructor had always believed she could be. The echo of William's voice would continue to guide her through future challenges, a constant reminder of the standards she was expected to meet and the soldiers who depended on her leadership. Years later, when Rebecca had become a drill instructor herself, she would share the story of that day with her own recruits. She would tell them about the moment when panic threatened to overwhelm her, and how William's voice had cut through the chaos to restore her confidence. The story would become part of the informal curriculum that shapes military leaders, a reminder that the bonds forged between instructors and students can have life and death consequences in the most challenging circumstances. The influence of William's teaching would continue to ripple through the ranks, shaping leaders who would face their own moments of crisis with the confidence and skills necessary to succeed. Rebecca's victory in the valley had been more than a tactical success. It had been a validation of the military's approach to leadership development and the power of mentorship to create extraordinary results under extreme pressure. As Rebecca's military career continued, she would face many more challenges and opportunities for leadership. But she would never forget the moment when William's voice had guided her through the most difficult test of her professional life. The drill instructor's investment in her development had created a legacy that would continue to influence military leadership for generations to come, proving that the best teachers are those who prepare their students not just for success, but for the moments when everything depends on their ability to lead others through the impossible.